Hi, my name is Marin Corsiniti, and I am a Chesapeake Conservation Corps member with ShoreRivers. Today I'll be presenting the workshop to you, Our Land, Our Water, a discussion of environmental justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today we'll be discussing what environmental injustice means, how we can identify it, and how we can address it in our communities. Before we get too far into it, I want you to take some time to address the first prompt on your worksheet. So go ahead and pause the video and take time to think about these 4 questions. When do you feel your voice has been heard or felt powerful? Did someone else empower you? And if so, what did they do to make you feel empowered? On the other hand, when have you felt disenfranchised or like your voice wasn't heard? How did others affect or worsen this feeling? All right, great job. I am going to go ahead and minimize my video so as to avoid distractions. But I want to talk to you really quickly about why I chose Our Land, Our Water as the title for this workshop. We all know the classic American song, "This land is your land, this land is my land." This song suggests that everyone has an equal stake in the physical and the metaphysical America. However, as we all know, that doesn't always shape up to be the case. And when that happens, we need justice. But we can't have justice unless we first have diversity, everyone in our community of all backgrounds being represented. Inclusion, when everyone's voice is given the same platform, and amplification, all voices are considered, and equity. Now, this graph is very, very popular. I've seen it in different forms in different places, and I think it expresses these different concepts very well. So equality is when everyone is given the same thing, regardless of their need. In reality, some are given much more than they require, some are given exactly enough, and some are actively denied anything that could help them. Equity is similar to equality, but it's when everyone is given to according to their needs. So in equality, everyone is given the same resources, and in equity, everyone receives the same outcomes. And then, of course, liberation or justice is when the systemic barrier has been removed. Does that make sense? Awesome. In the United States, as in most other countries, environmental injustices are linked very closely with social and economic injustices. And so if we want to address these problems, we can't ignore the fact that they have social and economic realities that create them. All right, so first we have to ask, what is environmental injustice? What does it look like? I want you to take a minute to brainstorm either with a friend, a family member, or just by yourself. What is environmental justice? What does it look like? On your worksheet for prompt 2, you can give a definition, an example, or a hypothetical. So go ahead and pause this video and then respond on your worksheet. All right, great work. So this is the working sample definition of environmental injustice that I came up with for this workshop. So using greenaction.org's definition of the environment, where we love, work, play, learn, and pray, environmental injustice is when certain groups of people receive fewer environmental benefits and far more environmental burdens than privileged groups. The environment that they live in receives fewer benefits and has more burdens put upon it. So with that in mind, I want you to look at your worksheet again and answer in the same way with either a definition, a hypothetical, an example, or an illustration. What is an environmental benefit and what is an environmental burden? So go ahead and pause and work on those questions. All right, great work. Now, environmental injustice can take place on the global, national, state, or local level. Let's go over some global examples. This is a great place to connect to history, government, or other social science classes. So here are 3 examples. All right, so our first example will be Ecuador. In 1964, Texaco, now Chevron, found oil in the Amazon and built substandard oil wells there to maximize their profit. When they left the area in 1992, they left behind over 1,000 toxic waste pits, having dumped billions of gallons of toxic waste into local waterways over the course of their work there. As you can see in this picture on the left, this young girl is standing next to a clearly marked Texaco oil barrel. On the right, this is their main area of operation during their time in Ecuador, including the Lago Ogrillo oil field. This specific oil field is considered especially bad. They've experienced all over, but especially badly here, water pollution, soil contamination, deforestation, and a general degradation of culture and disruption to the way of life there. So what used to be very pristine, beautiful rainforest now looks something like this. Next, we have Haiti. Most developed nations, quote unquote developed, like the United States and Canada, outsourced their waste. Trash, recycling, hazardous waste, and more ends up in the poorest countries in the world while we pretend like we've, quote unquote, gotten rid of it. A plastic bottle you throw away today could end up in a landfill in Haiti a few weeks from now, and impoverished peoples who live near that landfill will bear the burden of our trash. So this is a shipment specifically of American plastic to Haiti. And this dump is known as Hell on Earth in a National Post newspaper article. And this man, as well as many others, live around the dump. As you can imagine, that is not a healthy living environment. Our third example is the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The countries and peoples of Africa overall have survived countless abuses of environmental injustice in the past few centuries. For example, in South Africa, Black Africans' lands were stolen and used for game parks, decimating local wildlife populations and cutting the indigenous people's connection to their land. In the Congo, which was colonized by Belgium, land was eaten up for the production of rubber, and on these plantations, abuse of the land and the indigenous peoples were inextricably linked. The land and the people still bear the scars of colonization. Also in the Congo, there are still supplies of natural resources, but colonization and the wars it has wrought have left the country mostly unable to transform those resources into wealth. This is a map of territory claimed by Belgium from 1908 to 1960, so not very long ago at all. Decimation of local wildlife populations was extremely common. You can see the harvesting of ivory here. And rubber was also harvested through cruel stolen labor and poor plantation management. So not only was the local environment completely disrupted, but the way of life for many people there was too. This is a good example of where cultural injustice, financial injustice, and social injustice are very clearly linked with environmental injustice, because the social injustices, the human injustices that were committed by the Belgian government in the Congo went hand in hand with the environmental injustice there, and that still remains there. All right, let's go ahead and get into a case study that's a little more local. I want you to go ahead and guess at what we're going to talk about. On your worksheet, write down what you remember as having happened in Flint, Michigan recently, and more than that, why what happened there would be considered an example of environmental injustice. So go ahead and pause the video and respond to that prompt. It's important to note that, especially in cases of any injustice, to tell your stories, and inversely, not to tell stories that do not belong to you. We are using Flint as a case study, but we have to understand it in the words and experiences of the residents who actually experienced it. So for the most part, I will let the pictures and the facts do the talking. So what do you know about the crisis? What can you interpret from these pictures? Here's a brief timeline. The crisis began in 2014 when the city of Flint and the governor of Michigan switched Flint water sources from Detroit water to the Flint River. This was a desperate move to save money, and because it was an emergency maneuver because of the city's poor finances, it wasn't scrutinized as it would have been under normal circumstances. Flint residents soon began experiencing extremely discolored water coming from their taps, and soon suffered headaches, skin rashes, and hair loss. A Virginia Tech study showed this to be lead poisoning, as the water source switch had caused lead to leach into the water from old pipes. 12 people lost their lives due to lead poisoning and other factors in the water crisis. After 5 years of testing, protesting, calls for help, and national attention, Flint was finally switched back to Detroit water at the cost of $12 million. And even with this change, the crisis is still not fully resolved. It is important to note, almost every person who made the choice to change Flint's water supply without checking on the source and delivery methods, was older, white, middle to upper class, and male with political power and status. Most of the folks who suffered from the switch were middle to lower class, in poverty, disabled, and/or people of color. This is an infographic about the levels of lead in Flint compared with what are considered healthy or concerning levels of lead. So in the worst residential area of the water crisis, the lead concentration was 158 parts per billion, compared to the 5 parts per billion the EPA considers concerning, especially for children. Okay, so we just investigated on the global level and we saw an example on the national level. What do we see locally that signifies environmental injustice? Please take a couple minutes to discuss, brainstorm, do some research if you like, and then respond on your worksheet. Take a minute to ask yourself, where are the bad or dangerous areas? What do they look like and who lives there? Where is their toxic waste? Where are their oil pipelines? Who has access to clean water, to clean state parks and green spaces? Where are their factories, deforested land, and more? Please write 2 to 3 examples on your sheet. So go ahead and pause. Good work. I want to talk to you about one local example, which would be public waterfront access in Talbot County. In Talbot County, we're surrounded by water. Talbot has countless streams, creeks, rivers, and miles of bay shoreline. However, access to these waterways is not equal. This is a map from Maryland Department of Natural Resources and a map of Talbot County. If we zoom in on Talbot County, the blue dots on this map represent public points of access to water, including hard boat ramps and soft launches. A Google search turns up 2 public beaches in Talbot County, one in Oxford and one in Shadyside. So what about the rest of the waterfront? If all of this area that isn't blue isn't public, who's it for? Private owners, who demographically tend to be wealthy and white. Those who cannot afford to purchase waterfront property thus have limited access to what is, in theory, a public resource. I know that was heavy, so let's take a quick minute to breathe. Everyone in, everyone out. I know these things are heavy, sad, unfair, and heartbreaking. These discussions are hard, but they're also worth having. And more than that, we know that there's hope too. So let's pause, get up, take a stretch, get outside, get in some sunlight, and decompress for a few minutes, and then come back. All right, now that we're all back, let's look into a new question. What is environmental justice? So same as before, take a minute to think about it, brainstorm examples and definitions. If you can, offer an environmentally just solution to one of the cases of environmental injustice we discussed earlier. So go ahead and pause and respond to this prompt on your sheet. All right, by this point you might be wondering, why is a river keeping organization talking to me about environmental justice? Well, first and foremost, any form of justice isn't just for justice advocates. Social and environmental injustice affect all of us in some way, and we need to recognize it and incorporate it into our work to make real change. And secondly, waterkeeping is truly a movement based in environmental justice. It's considered the fastest growing grassroots movement in the environmental field, building from its start on the Hudson River in 1983 to now all 6 inhabited continents, many connected by the Waterkeeper Alliance. Waterkeeping began as a protest of toxic pollution and has its basis in the idea that water should be clean and safe for all, especially those most affected by pollution. ShoreRivers was born as a part of that goal, and it stretches even to China. This is a picture of Yongchen Wang, who is the Beiyun River Keeper. All right, and now let's do an activity together. So please get out a sheet of paper or open up a drawing application like Microsoft Paint. We want to explore, what does it take to enact environmental justice? Or what does it mean to be a person who practices environmental justice? What body parts and equipment do you need? So here we have just a couple of examples. So first you need eyes to help identify problems, a heart to care, and hands to reach out and help others. Before you create your community member, I just want to show you a few pictures. We ran this activity in a workshop on environmental justice at the 2020 Youth Environmental Action Summit at the Ward Museum. About 25 students attended and crafted their own environmentally just community members to give you some inspiration. So here are some of the community members they formed. And if you have high school students and you want a slightly higher level activity, you can try this empathy mapping activity instead. You can present them with or ask them to identify an environmental justice issue and then have them complete the activity. If you would rather complete this activity instead of or in addition to the environmentally just citizen, we would love to see your results. So please take as much time as you would like to complete these activities. I'll leave this screen up, so go ahead and pause. All right, welcome back. So the next thing I would like to do is introduce you to our hero spotlights. Things got better in Flint, and it's in large part due to people like Mari Kopeny. Let's watch this video together and I'll let her speak for herself.
We're the game changers, baby! My name is Mari Kopeny. I'm 10 years old. I live in Flint, Michigan, and you may know me as Little Miss Flint. I would describe myself as weird, beautiful, and very talented. I started becoming an activist when I was 4 to 5. I started helping out with my grandmother, passing out food to people who couldn't afford food, so we just gave them food for free, and that's when the water crisis started. The government was switching the water source because they were taking the water from Detroit, so the water was eating away the pipes, and that's what caused lead and chlorine to get into the water. In my family, we were getting bad rashes and headaches, eye burning, and it smelled. So I wanted to speak up and say, hey, the water's bad. Could someone please fix it? But they never did fix it. So I said, well, now listen to me because I'm a kid. I want to.
I know. That's why I decided to come. I'm going to talk about you in my speech. All the good work you're doing. That's pretty cool, man. Come on. Give me one. Let's get a good one.
Barack Obama. It was so amazing. He gives the best hugs, and then we started talking about what I have done so far, and then he said, stay in school and do your homework. Tomorrow we're passing out 75 pallets of water in a Flint community.
How much water is it?
150,000 bottles! The government stopped paying for our water, so now people have to buy it. So we decided that we should just give them water for water distribution, so now they can just get free water. I have a huge team that helped me put this together. If I was a superhero, my superpower would be to change the world, and I would just snap my fingers and then food would appear. Everything would be in my hands right now. I like drawing. I got drawn today. I like reading comic books. Oh, go with the Black Panthers. I like types of books. I'm right there. In my house, we use 3 cases of water a day. I use water bottles for brushing my teeth, drinking, and cooking.
She inspires me to go after my dreams. Throughout the crisis, we've met a ton of different types of people throughout the city. And I think that the city of Flint, after this is over, is going to be really united because they all went through the same struggle, Age is just a number. An 8-year-old girl got the president of the United States to come to Flint, Michigan. As long as you're determined and very outspoken, then you can do it all. She's a little woman activist.
Don't forget about Flint!
All right. Mari is still active and speaking out for clean water in many communities in the US, not just Flint. You can find her on Twitter and join her Wednesdays for Water movement. She has even been putting on weekly water distribution events and other drives to help her community in Flint since she was 8, like she said. She also leads initiatives called Pack Your Back and Dear Flint Kids, providing material and emotional support for kids in Flint. She also has over 121,000 followers on Twitter. Our next hero spotlight is Destiny Watford. Destiny is a Baltimore native who, while still in high school, successfully ran a campaign to prevent what would have been the nation's largest incinerator from being built. The incinerator would have been less than a mile from both her neighborhood of Curtis Bay and her school, and I will let her say the rest for herself. So if you can, just follow this link, pause our video, and go ahead and watch Destiny's video. And there are many more ways for environmental justice advocates to reach their goals. The Healthy Green Maryland Amendment is a piece of current and important environmental justice legislation. Though the amendment died during the 2020 legislative session, the spirit of the amendment highlights many environmental justice goals for Maryland that will not just go away, and it is believed to come back in future sessions. To quote a bulletin created by forthegenerations.org, our goal is to pass a Maryland constitutional amendment that guarantees the right to clean air, pure water, a stable climate, a healthy and healthful environment for all Marylanders. This means that every person has the right to a healthy and healthful environment. The natural resources of the state, including climate, are common property of every person. The state and each political subdivision shall serve as trustees of the state's natural resources, protecting against unreasonable degradation by action or inaction. This amendment could be used to strike down unjust laws, remove unjustly granted permits, promote smarter and environmentally just government decision-making, and promote better budgetary decisions. All right, so now we're going to start to wrap up. What rights do we need to push for to ensure environmental justice? What does everyone have a right to? I want us to make our own outdoor Bill of Rights. This would be a great activity to do with students, especially at the high school level when they're learning about how government really works. So first, let's get some ideas. I want you to keep these questions and concepts in mind as you're drafting. What does access to clean water look like for consumption or recreation? What are the locations of dumps, incinerators, waste creation, and disposal sites in your area? Who has access to safe and healthy recreation areas, and what does safe and healthy require? Is there availability of safe waste and recycling disposal? And also think about the frequency of environment-related medical conditions in your area, asthma, cancer, and other similar conditions. We also conducted this activity during our environmental justice workshop at the Youth Environmental Action Summit. This is the result as an example. Our students believe that we have the right to protest, to stop bullies of all kinds, including those that pollute our environment. We have the right to full knowledge about what is being done to our environment. We have the right to healthy homes and resources, and we have the right to play outside. If you would like to look at another example of an outdoor Bill of Rights, you can check out Baltimore City's Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. So go ahead and pause the video and respond to the prompt on your worksheet. Try to come up with at least 5 to 7 ideas about some outdoor rights. All right, welcome back and great work. I'm so excited to receive all of your ideas. For now though, let's start our wrap up and put this into practice. It's important to think about these questions in your specific context. What is your community like? We talked a lot about different forms of environmental injustice and also what everyone has a right to. So do you have students whose outdoor rights might be being violated? What can we do about it? Go ahead and respond to prompt 10 in your worksheet and pause now. We have the questions: how can I include environmental justice content in my courses? How can I make sure that I am being equitable while teaching? And what can we do as community leaders to address environmental injustice? So those are the questions you'll be responding to. Okay, now that you've had the chance to work out some ideas, I want to share a few ideas with you from ShoreRivers. If tools are a barrier for access for your students, do a tool share. Maybe a lot of your students don't have access to rain boots or life jackets or acceptable water shoes or even a garden spade. Encourage your students that do have these items to donate extras to a classroom pool of resources. Make sure you never assume what a student has or doesn't have. Another great thing you can do, especially if you're not super well versed in these concepts or you don't feel as comfortable yet directly dealing with environmental justice, is you can directly connect your students to organizations that make environmental justice a priority. I've listed a few examples of organizations that you can specifically connect your students to, and they have either Eastern Shore chapters or ties that you can connect with. I want to specifically highlight Baltimore Beyond Plastic. Baltimore Beyond Plastic is a completely student-run organization, and they've done extremely meaningful work in reducing single-use plastics and other waste in Baltimore. All right, so this is their website, bemorebeyondplastic.org. If we scroll down on their homepage, you can see that Baltimore Beyond Plastic is a youth-led organization founded in 2016 to support a Maryland expanded polystyrene styrofoam phase-out. Our work continues to grow to embrace a variety of environmental topics. Baltimore Beyond Plastic coordinates youth advocacy efforts around a diverse range of environmental problems facing Baltimore City, such as waste and trash, climate change and energy, economic inequalities and job insecurities, and health disparities stemming from environmental issues. They have a special focus around plastic and pollutants. So if you look, you can see how they prioritize youth voice because, as they say, youth are not disposable. So this is their section of their website where they show a lot of their great work and their protests. And then your students can even contribute their own story through the Your Story feature on their website. So if you're looking to connect your students, this is a great place to start. All right, I have just a couple of closing words and then we're done. I want to share a few different quotes with you. One is the Audre Lorde quote, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." It's important that your students know that even if they're nervous or difficult or feel like they can't navigate adult spaces, they can, and their voice is worth sharing. The other quote I'd like to share is a Thomas Fuller quote. "He who plants trees loves others besides himself." I think that's at the core of the environmental justice movement. We love our full communities and we want to make sure we take care of each other. And participating in the environment and making our communities a good place to live make that possible. All right, this has been Maren from Shore Rivers. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.